Your conscious mind then is responsible for the other 5% of the mind. And I think of it a bit like a rowing boat sat on top of the water. And this is the thing, it's what you can see outside of you. So it's what you call reality. And you're merrily rowing along, being consciously aware of life. And if you don't like the view, you say, do you know what? I'm going to turn the boat around. I get my metaphorical oars out and I'm going to go in a different direction. But what many people don't realise or don't necessarily know about and take into account is that the submarine and the rowing boat are tied together. And the submarine didn't get the memo. So it's carrying on in its direction. And in the rowing boat, you're almost pulling against it and thinking, why isn't this working? I'm exhausted. It's willpower. And you're using 5% of the power of the mind to pull against the other 95%. So the work that I do is essentially diving into the submarine, finding out what are these beliefs? What are the patterns of behavior that you're carrying out? And then if they're not working for you, using tools like NLP, timeline therapy, hypnotherapy to reprogram the mind very quickly so that you change the direction of the submarine to where you want it to go. And then the rowing boat, you're kind of going along for the ride. Doesn't mean that it's easy and you don't have to work, yet you feel in alignment with everything that you're doing. So when you say, I can do this, that voice in your head is saying, yeah, you can. And you are in agreement with you.
Okay, everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I have yet another amazing author joining me from the future, which is always great. Sian Hill is with us. We're going to be talking about her journey as an author. She's a coach that can help you learn how to be a better coach. What a great combo there. And we're going to talk about all things authorship. And I'm excited to have Sian here on the podcast. Sian, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. Glad to see you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. From the other side of the world and your future.
And the future. Wow, this is great. And I know that Sian, I don't have an accent at all, being a Canadian. We're accent free. And then people usually laugh when I say that because we do have an accent. But I notice your accent's beautiful. Can you tell everybody where you are in this big world of ours?
Yeah, of course. I'm in the UK. I'm in the middle of the UK. So I think Birmingham's probably the most known near to where I am. I'm just south of that in Worcestershire, which is filled with hills and fields and countryside. A really, really beautiful part of the world.
I want to come there so bad. I trace my roots back to Scotland and that whole part of the world. So I would just love to go spend like 2 months just going everywhere and doing everything over there. I've met some great people there as well, being a host of a podcast. So I live vicariously through you, through my screen, knowing that we're doing this together across the pond. This is amazing. So I love this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's opened up the world, hasn't it?
All right. So let's talk a little bit about your author journey. I love starting there. When did you kind of come to the realization that writing and being an author was going to be part of your future?
It was never a plan. No, I never had any real desire to write a book. It was prompted off the back of what I would say is like a hard time for myself. I was going through a bit of a tough time and realized how much I was pulling on the tools that I have as a coach, as a trainer to get me through that period, and felt a calling almost to share it with the rest of the world, because I felt, there's probably people out there that don't have the knowledge that I haven't ever been aware that it exists. So it was through that I felt compelled to start writing. And so there's kind of a two-pronged approach to it. There's that, and also it's the book that I wish that I'd have had when I first started reading about the topics that are included in it. So the frustrations that I had through my learning process are in the book.
Okay, so give us one of those frustrations that you cover in your book.
Okay, so the book is all about the law of attraction and how you create your reality from the inside out. When I first understood that there was this thing called the law of attraction and we have the ability to change our life through changing our thoughts, I was so frustrated about how do I change my thoughts? Because I believed it, I got it, I understood it, yet I felt like my thoughts were thinking me. So the books that I was reading at the time, which have since moved on quite dramatically, were a lot about this is what the law of attraction is. This is what it can do for you, yet the how to actually change your thoughts was lacking. So I really wanted to understand myself more and a process to begin that change. So the book that I've written today is not only filled with the information about why we see the world in the way that we do, how we actually create our reality. So it's the mechanics behind why we see certain things versus not see certain things. And then if we don't like the world as it is, what we can do to change the way we think, to change the way that we feel, so we can start to take control of our own lives and create our destiny, in essence.
Okay, so the whole idea around the law of attraction, what originally attracted you to the law of attraction? Because I've heard other commentators, authors, and creatives talking about the law of attraction, but there might be some people listening to this today and this is their first time hearing about this. Can you kind of break that down a little bit more for us?
Yeah, absolutely. It started off the back of my life being what I would call pretty crappy. So it wasn't good. Life was in a pretty awful, or how I perceived it at the time, a pretty bad situation. I was in a bad relationship. I had health struggles. I was in a lot of debt. I had no career prospects. And I was quickly heading towards the ripe old age of 30, where I thought that I would have had it all sorted. I'd be made, the kind of what a good life is tick box exercise would have been done. And none of that was happening. Around that same time, my mum gave me a book, which it was The Secret, which is very well known now.
Yeah.
And it said that it was all about the law of attraction and how your thoughts become things. And to begin with, I didn't like that very much because I looked at my life and thought, well, so you're telling me I created this? that isn't what I wanted. Yeah, it made total sense to me because the thoughts that I'd had about myself since as far back as I could remember were that I wasn't good enough. I didn't have any confidence. I would never achieve anything. So when I looked at where I was at that time, I thought, yeah, this totally makes sense. This is my life. So I knew that it worked and I knew that I'd created everything up to that point, yet I didn't understand how to shift it. So the law of attraction in its most simplest form is that it's like attracts like. The thoughts, the feelings, the way that we show up in the world determines the behaviors and the actions that we carry out, which ultimately lead to the results that we get. It goes deeper than that in the book. In the book, I talk about quantum physics and how thoughts become things. Yet that's the kind of the overhead summary of your thoughts create your life. So if you don't like your life, you can create new thoughts and that will bring new opportunities to you, new awarenesses. So it changes your perception of the world and what you're ultimately seeing in it.
What were some of those early new thoughts that you were focused on that helped change your trajectory and where you were headed in your 30s? What were some of those new thoughts that you kind of brought that seemed to come out and rechange your focus?
It started with some of the things that people would probably go to even today, which was I began meditating and visualizing and saying affirmations every day. And I did feel better in the moment while I was doing those. So, doing the meditation, after the meditation, I felt great. And then an hour or so later, I was back in what I would call reality. The usual thought processes kicked back in and my default emotional level. So the majority of the time I was still being me. And then I'd have these kind of bite-sized episodes where I would feel good. The affirmations, I would say them and say them and say them. And the voice in my head would say, like if I was saying, oh, you are good enough, the voice in my head would say, no, you're not. Who do you think you're kidding? So I felt like I was fighting with myself constantly.
Wow.
What that did was led me down a rabbit hole. So I started looking for the answer to my question, which was, how do I change my thoughts? And I started finding the answers bit by bit. So this word NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, that kept coming up. And I'd heard of hypnotherapy. So it's like, right, these are the kind of techniques that are going to help me to reprogram my mind so that I can think differently. So it was a bit of a journey to begin with that was almost frustratingly slow. It was the small moments where I felt better. So I knew that I could feel better and I didn't know how to sustain it. It was when I then stumbled across NLP and thought, this keeps coming up. So that's my brain telling me something. That's the universe telling me something. That I investigated that further. I decided to book on a course. So rather than have a coach take me through that process, that I'm going to learn this stuff myself, purely for selfish reasons. I had no intention of working in this field whatsoever. I did a course over an 8-day period and it absolutely transformed everything. It was mind-blowing how quickly you can actually change the way you think and feel. So that was the catalyst then that changed the whole trajectory of my life. And it didn't happen overnight. It's been a journey ever since then. It's almost like, peeling back the layers, and you peel back another layer and it's like, oh, here we have some more. It started to begin with in that I began getting opportunities in the field that I was working in at that time. So, these jobs that I never thought I was good enough for, now I'm suddenly getting them. And when I got those jobs and started doing them regularly, I realized I'm talking about this NLP stuff, this timeline therapy, this hypnotherapy, all these things. That's what I talk about all the time. So I realized that my passion had just shifted, which is when I decided to turn it into a career.
Nice. It's interesting. It's kind of like from a medicine point of view, when we feel ill or we have pain, the doctor prescribes us medicine, and that just kind of numbs the pain. It doesn't solve the original cause of the pain. That can still come back, and we just have this way of tolerating the pain. It seems like with you and what you're describing, it's not about just medicating what you're feeling. It's more about getting back to the root of why it's being caused and dealing with it there, so that you don't have to deal with the symptoms and the pain afterwards. You just go to the root, and you're rethinking and reprogramming how you do life. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great analogy, and it's one that I use with the people that I work with, in that even, as people, the things that we're aware of in life are the symptomology. So the symptoms that we experience, which are, I don't go dating, or I won't put myself forward for the job, and they seem to be separate from each other. Yet if you look at what's behind that, is beliefs that are driving it. And if you look at what's behind that, then there may be even further. And when you go to the doctor, you say, I've got a snotty nose, I've got a tickly throat. And they go, right, well, what's that about? It's a cold. Okay, what's the driving force? What's the pattern, the thoughts, the beliefs? Well, it's your immune system. And if you deal with the immune system, or the mental and emotional immune system, then you never experience the snotty nose, the runny eyes. You've dealt with it at the core. And that's what it's all about. It's diving into the unconscious mind and looking at what is it that's not working. It's not that it's good or bad. It's just not supporting you in achieving the life that you want today.
I like the immunity thing. That's a good reference point. I like that. That really helps give some clarity, I believe, for people that are wrestling with this new idea around the law of attraction. That's amazing. Take us through, you said that you weren't anticipating becoming a writer. So what was the journey like for you to become a writer? Was it a challenge for you to sit down and map this book out and your journey and start writing? Because that wasn't your motivation initially.
No, it was probably one of the biggest self-development journeys I've been on. It was really enlightening, because at the time we'd just gone into lockdown, to give you a bit of context. And my business was relatively new, and it was a classroom-based training. So the rug had been pulled from under me, and it was like, your courses don't operate anymore. People were dropping out left, right, and centre. Couldn't accredit people, because the programs that I run are accredited, and you couldn't accredit people online at that point. It wasn't really a thing. So everything had gone up in the air. I was a new business, didn't get any support financially from the government or anything, and couldn't operate. Right. So this was the point where I was like, right, I really have to walk the talk. Walk the walk? What's the saying? Whatever that one is. Yeah, both of them, walk and talk. And the book, as I was writing it, I was pulling on the tools myself. So I was like, this is how I know that it works. And the process of writing it was also implementing the tools. So that, to give you an example, working very long days at the time, and then also getting up early to write the book, or finishing late and squeezing it in here and there, and realizing, this is, I say to people, and always have done, you've got to be willing to go the extra mile and do whatever it takes to create the life that you want. I was like, this is outside of my comfort zone. I didn't always want to get up at 5, but I knew that I had things that I had to do, or wanted to do. And then there were the moments where I went through, does anybody care what I have to say? Who am I to write a book? So again, I was pulling on what I know to release those beliefs and get myself thinking differently. And I kind of learned a better process to write a book after I'd written it. So I did it all backwards and learned how not to do things. So if I was to go into the writing process again, I would approach it very differently. I just sat with my laptop open and started typing. I didn't map out where the book was going.
Okay.
I put it down at times for a couple of weeks because I'd forgotten what was happening with it. I wasn't sure what path I was on. The chapters, I moved them about afterwards. So it was chapter 10 turned into chapter 2 and back again. I actually rewrote some stuff that I hadn't realised I'd already included. I edited as I went through it. So, it was probably more painful than it had to be, yet one of the biggest learning curves ever. So it was a real passion project. And I wouldn't change it because I do think I learned so much from it. And next time it'll be so much easier. She says.
Okay, so exactly. There's new authors listening right now that are right in the middle of this. They've taken a break from their computer. They're listening to our conversation. They're exactly where you were writing your book. Any words of wisdom that you can offer to them as they take a break from writing and they're a little frustrated that it's not just happening and falling into place real easy?
Yeah, I think to kind of pull on one of the principles that's listed in the book and the work that I do is to ask yourself really good questions, because your brain searches for the answers to the questions that you ask it. It's a really clever piece of machinery. And many new authors that I've spoken to since have sat at their desk and asked themselves, why can't I do this? Why is it I'm struggling with finding the words? So your brain is programmed to go and seek the information that you've just asked for it. So if you ask yourself, right, how can this be easy? How can I come up with the next chapter? What ideas do I already have available to me? And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get the answer in that moment, yet just leaving your brain ticking over with that question, it will begin to show you evidence of it in ways that you maybe hadn't even thought of. So just to kind of take the pressure off and enjoy it and think, how can I enjoy this? Because writing a book is usually something that you feel some passion behind. Yet if you find yourself getting bogged down in it, it loses the spark and the reason why you started the process in the first place. So reconnect with that through the questions that you want answering, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. Take us through the moment when the book is done. It arrives at your home for the first time. You have your hands on a copy of your book that, took so long to kind of work through, and you've grown as a person in the process. You're now holding the result of that journey. What does that feel like?
Mixed, very, very mixed. That very exciting, a bit of disbelief going on. And also I had a real, oh, bugger moment. This is really happening. Other people are going to be able to read this. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't say panic, but it was a reality check in that, oh, this is real now. No more editing. Because I think it can be easy to get comfortable in continually editing without realizing that every day of the week we have the opportunity to grow and change as people, and we'll always go back and change something. So it's never going to be perfect. You've almost got to, it's like, I don't have children, but I can imagine it's like sending your child off to school for the first day. It's exciting. You want to do it, and you probably want to pull them back and say, "Oh no, it's you're not ready. There's still things we need to do." And I felt like that with the book, that it was, and almost a moment of, now what? Because I know that really the journey had only just begun. I've written it, I've put it together, and now it's about sharing it with the world. Because if nobody reads it, then did it ever exist? And I know it did, but so it's a real, I did allow myself to have a moment of, okay, I can take a breath just for a second to appreciate what an accomplishment it is to get to that point, which, never thought that I would. And then there it was in front of me. So,
You think about how many unfinished books there are in the world, sitting on a computer, on a piece of paper, that have been put away and just not finished. And now you have it. You've got to the finish line.
Yeah.
But a shameless plug for the name of my podcast, Living the Next Chapter, is that you are living it, even when it's done and in your hands. It doesn't mean that you stop thinking about it and you're not developing your book more and having new ideas. Anything that you would have added to the book now that you've learned after it's been published, that you're like, oh, I wish I included this little piece or this new insight. Anything that's kind of come to you after the fact?
Well, the book had a lot taken out of it because it would have been the never-ending book otherwise.
Yeah.
So there were lots of parts that I took out of it. And I did, even in the early part of the process, I had book 2 in mind, because I thought this is a continual journey. It's not that we read a book and then our lives magically changed and we're done and that's it. Yeah. Life's good forever. There's always more to learn. So I thought this is kind of the introduction with a bit of depth to it. And then book 2 will add on to that. And I hope that as I continue to evolve and learn, I'll have more and more to share. I'll just do it in a kind of way to myself, maybe map out a process first and make it easier.
Yeah. So you are living the next chapter by pursuing book number 2 then?
Yes. Yeah, it's only just begun. So I've had a few ideas brewing for a while. I've got the information that I want to put into it. And it's my question this time was, how do I really bring it to life? Because I love using metaphors and analogies because it's a non-fiction book. It's like, how do I get people to understand it in a way that they can relate to it? So I've been looking at which kind of direction to take it in and which is the biggest problem that I want people to be able to solve through the book. So I have started, I've written the introduction and started on chapter 1, and I have mapped out the chapters. If I continue on this direction, what's the heading and what do I want to get from each chapter? And no editing is going to happen. So even if I can't remember what I wrote in the introduction, I'm just carrying on anyway.
That's amazing. And I think you have to write book 1 to get to book 2. You have to do the work, right? To learn and grow and then take what you've learned and apply it to the next project. And I think that's how we as humans get better, is if we never write book 1, you'll never write book 2 because you need that first book. It kind of numerically, that's how it happens, right? So I think in every little task that we do, we have to do the first thing to get to where we want to be, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's what I talk about a lot in my book, is that because it's all about creating your reality, there can be this idea that I go from maybe $20,000 in debt and I want to be a millionaire. And it's like, yes, that can absolutely happen. And there's a bit of bridging of the gap, which is the belief in ourselves and getting there and the actions that we take and who we become in that journey. And it's the same with a book. It's like, oh, I want a New York Times bestseller or whatever it might be. It's like, you've got to write something first. So see that as the training ground, even if it's, it may be the best book ever. It may be read by very, very few. Yet just doing that, you're going to have more clarity on your writing style and what you enjoy. And then book 2 is probably going to be a much better version of what book 1 could have been.
Right. And I think it keeps coming back over and over again when I talk to authors and creative people is you don't know what you don't know. We have limited knowledge about what we know in life, and there are other people who can help us and see our blind spots, help us to uncover new things about us that we don't realize our potential is. And with you and what you do, helping and building up coaches, I'd love to kind of go there a little bit and talk about that as well, because you're helping people uncover their ability to coach and lead. Mm-hmm. Can you kind of talk a little bit about how you uncover and help people realize the things they don't know about themselves and kind of that process? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's again, it's a never-ending process. And I have two views on this, because I think the uncovering of things during the writing process and life in general is wonderful. And for everything that we uncover and we resolve and integrate within ourselves, we're then able to evolve as people. And at the same time, whilst writing, that whole ignorance of what you don't know can be an absolute blessing. That because there can certainly be some constraints in this is how it should be, this is what I'm meant to do. And then you live writing a book by a rule book that was just created probably at some point to help with marketing and something else. So it's like, just write and get your own style in that. Now, when it comes to helping people to understand what those blocks are, what those limiting beliefs are, what are, often what I see with people who've said that they would like to write a book, they instantly come up with all the reasons why they can't or they shouldn't. The way that I work, if I give you an analogy to bring this to life, is if you imagine your mind, you've got two minds. You've got your conscious mind and your unconscious mind. Your conscious mind is everything that you're aware of in this moment. So the sound of my voice, whatever you can see around you. Your unconscious mind is then everything else that's happening. So the temperature of your breath as you breathe in and out. It was always there, but until we pointed it out, you probably weren't thinking about it, and the sounds in the distance. Now, between the age of 0 to 7, you are a little unconscious sponge. So there's no conscious mind in place at that time, and you're just absorbing the world around you, taking on the beliefs, the values, the behaviors, the personality that is being demonstrated to you. So you just absorb it all. Now, if you imagine your mind then is programmed, I think of the unconscious mind a bit like a submarine. So it's under the water. It's responsible for 95% of the power of the mind. And those programs are installed between the age of 0 and 7. So it kind of heads on its way merrily in the direction of, this is how I think, this is how I feel, this is how I act. And you do it all on autopilot, which is really super useful because you can carry out day-to-day stuff without thinking. Yet there are the programs that don't serve us, like the limiting beliefs. Your conscious mind then is responsible for the other 5% of the mind. And I think of it a bit like a rowing boat sat on top of the water. And this is the thing, it's what you can see outside of you. So it's what you call reality. And you're merrily rowing along, being consciously aware of life. And if you don't like the view, you say, do you know what? I'm going to turn the boat around. I get my metaphorical oars out and I'm going to go in a different direction. But what many people don't realize or don't necessarily know about and take into account is that the submarine and the rowing boat are tied together. And the submarine didn't get the memo. So it's carrying on in its direction. And in the rowing boat, you're almost pulling against it and thinking, why isn't this working? I'm exhausted. It's willpower. And you're using 5% of the power of the mind to pull against the other 95%. So the work that I do is essentially diving into the submarine, finding out what are these beliefs? What are the patterns of behavior that you're carrying out? And then if they're not working for you, using tools like NLP, timeline therapy, hypnotherapy to reprogram the mind very quickly so that you change the direction of the submarine to where you want it to go. And then the rowing boat, you're kind of going along for the ride. Doesn't mean that it's easy and you don't have to work, yet you feel in alignment with everything that you're doing. So when you say, I can do this, that voice in your head is saying, yeah, you can. And you are in agreement with you.
That is such a great visual. I'm there with you in the rowboat going, why are we not going anywhere? Why are we going backwards? And I'm also there with you in the submarine going, I don't know what's happening up top. I can't see the rowboat where I am. And we're just going to go left, and the rowboat's going right. Doesn't matter. We're bigger than the rowboat. We're going to go left. So I'm with you there.
Yeah, and you can almost imagine from the rowing boat, you've got your speakerphone out and you're saying, right, we're going to go left. We're going to write a book. And then the next day you go, no, go right. I've changed my mind. So the submarines go like, well, which way are we going? Just give me a clear instruction and stick to it.
Yeah.
So
that's a great visual. I love this.
Yeah, the book is filled with it. And that's, for me, I thought, unless I can explain it in a way that brings it to life, that I get it almost in a childlike way, then I'm not ready to write about it because I feel like I'd just be regurgitating stuff that I've heard on a training course or read in somebody else's book. So it's like, how do I make sense of this? And then articulate that to people so maybe they can bring it to life in their own mind.
It's kind of like, well, here we go with doing analogies myself. It's like a recipe. I can read you the recipe or you can taste it. And it's probably better for you to taste it and then tell you how it was made than to try to explain to you a cup of this and 2 cups of that and a little pinch of this. No, like, here's what it tastes like. Here's where we can go. And now let's hear the steps to get there. I think a lot of books seem to focus on the steps, and they don't have any story. They don't have anything that ties it all together to give us some clarity and a visual. So what you're doing with the rowboat and the submarine, for me now, I totally understand what you're saying, and it gets beyond just somebody reading to me the steps. You know, and you expect me as a reader to make sense of it all and put it all together. Here are the steps. You need to know this, but here's a way of thinking about it in a different way that'll give you context.
Yeah.
And the two of those together, I think we learn better by story than being just handed a bunch of information. And here you go. Here's the info. Here, I'm an expert. You know, this is what you need to do. And then we have to put it together like a puzzle. That's way too hard sometimes.
Absolutely. And it can almost be that, I'm listening to an expert and they're articulating it in such a way that I don't quite comprehend. I get it, but how do I use it? And then that can almost put up a barrier to, well, I'll never be able to do that. And those moments are actually gold dust, because the minute that you go to do something, whether it's writing a book or whatever, the thoughts that come up, the beliefs that come up, they're the very things that we're often not conscious of or don't pay attention to. So to go kind of full circle and answer your question about how do we become aware of, the shadow aspects, the things that we don't know, is to start to pay attention and become aware of our unconscious thoughts and feelings. Like when you say, oh, I'm thinking about writing a book. And then instantly, oh, but who am I to do that? And we almost dismiss that and just carry on with our day. If you're actually to stop in that moment and think, who am I to do? What's that all about? And maybe journal on it and just notice, where else am I thinking that in my life? Because we tend to take ourselves with us into different contexts and have similar kind of thoughts, which is, again, going to the root cause, the immune system of, right, if I just deal with this belief that I'm not good enough or whatever it might be, then I'll feel that I'm able to write the book. I'll feel that I'm able to put myself forward for the job or go on the date or start a Zumba class.
Wow. Okay, so Sian, I work with podcasters as well outside of doing this, helping them start podcasts. I also work with people who want to be guests on podcasts. And one of the resounding comments I hear back is, who's going to listen to me? Who would ever want me as a guest on their show? There's so many other people out there that are better than me, know more than I do. And I just simply say to them, you're so unique that no one can copy you. Mm-hmm. So don't worry about what you don't know. Just focus on what you do know. Share your story, because you never know who it's going to resonate with. And your audience can only be reached by you. I can't be you, Sian. I can't do what you do. There's no way I can do it. I can't even copy you because of who you know, what you've learned, your journey, your story. And you need to rest in the fact that you're the expert on you. Mm-hmm. And even if there's 100 books about NLP, great. They don't see it through your lens.
Yeah.
They're not going to do the same illustrations and stories and draw from your resources and your journey of an author. Mm-hmm. They can't replicate you by any means.
Yeah.
So in that right there alone, your uniqueness is your creative edge in anything you do in life, because nobody can copy you.
Yeah, it's true. And I think it goes back to what I mentioned earlier about being an expert and being able to articulate something is wonderful. And the person that is listening that very day may just need somebody who's a step ahead of them that they really resonate with. And they think, this person is just like me, but the other side of the thing that I'm going through right now, or they're sharing with me the inspiration that matches where I'm at in this moment. Because, the person who's saying, here's how I sold 100 million copies of whatever book, for somebody sat at home who's just opened their laptop for the first time, that may be too big a jump. It may not be, yet they may want to hear from the person who's written their first chapter. That's what I can do that. That person gets me, I'm closer to them, and they've inspired me to go and take that action today. So I think, people often think about the big picture of reaching millions of people and things like that. And it's like, if you had 30 people listen to your podcast every week, just imagine 30 people sat in your living room while you talk to them. and the impact that that can have. And it may just be that very next step. So I think to kind of, again, I think I said it earlier, taking the pressure off and just seeing it as today, there may be one person that just wants to hear what I've got to say. And I want to share it. And I feel compelled to talk about this very thing that I've just been through. I'm not saying I'm all the way down the road. I'm saying, here's where I was and here's where I am. And here's been my journey. And hey, here's my life. Some people just like to hear about people's lives.
Yeah. I love it. Talk before we go, Sian, I want to talk about your coaching program, what you're working on, what you're building as well, because you're helping people on their journey to be a better coach and maybe follow that path. Can you talk a little bit about that and kind of how we connect with you around that? Because I want to draw people into your world as well, because I think they're going to learn so much from spending time with you, reading your book, and just connecting with you in community. So who are you serving through your program and your coaching program, and kind of how we connect with you around that?
Yeah. So thank you for asking. It's I run an accredited coach training program online. So over a period of 12 weeks, I train people to become practitioners of NLP and timeline therapy and coaching. So it's giving people the tools that I learned so that not only they can change their own life and use it as their own personal development journey, at the end of it, they're accredited so they can go and work with other people if that's what they want to do, if they want to step into the world of coaching. Within that, I do have many coaches come to me. They're already accredited, yet the coaching work that they've been doing has been very focused on the rowing boat stuff. So they say, I've been doing all the action steps and taking, been writing my lists and doing analysis about where I am, yet still haven't dealt with the belief that's stopping me from achieving everything that I want. So, it's a wonderful self-discovery process where you learn a lot of practical tools, but more than that, you change your own thinking about the world and the possibilities within it and what you're able to achieve, which then the knock-on effect happens in all areas of life, from, your health and how you approach it, your relationships, your career. It's fantastic. So there's that way. And then I also work one-to-one with people as well. So if there's somebody that's like, I don't want to be a coach, I don't want to learn this stuff, just get into my submarine and change the direction. Then I also offer that as well.
Amazing. And how do we connect with you around that then?
So Instagram's probably the best place. If you look me up on there, I've got my website. Everything is I am Sian Hill. So Instagram, I am Sian Hill website, and there's all details there.
Excellent. So one last question before we go. And again, you're thinking about working on your next book, which is great. And I love that you're on the path to book number 2. Please come back and talk about that when it's close to or ready to go. I'd love to be there, part of your launch for book 2, and support you in that way as being on the podcast. Love to have you back as a guest. So keep me in mind. I would love to have you back. But one last question before you go. A question that I'm wrestling with personally is, Sian, when you leave the room, think of a big public thing, or you've left the stage, you've done a talk, and you've walked out of the room and you're done. What do you hope that people are going to say about you, Sian, when you're not in the room? Your family, friends, people have worked with you, people have heard your voice here on the podcast, read your book. You as a person, what do you want people to say about you when you're not even there?
Oh, I've never been asked that before. That's such a good question. I would like to think that my whole mission in life is to have a positive impact. I want to make a difference in the world. And the way that I choose to do that right now is through the courses and the coaching. So I suppose it would be around that something that I did was a catalyst for change, no matter how big or small, in many people's lives. That I did make a difference. I think, that would be it. I'm not sure if that's
I like it.
Very exciting or not, but if I was able to come back and listen and hear what's being said, then I know that the mission that I set out to do worked, for want of a better word. It was fulfilled.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you this from my perspective as listening to you in this conversation, you've already done that for me. So I've never heard of this illustration about the rowboat and the submarine. That's my new focus now. I'm thinking like my submarine has been running unattended for so long. I don't even know where it's headed. I have no idea. So you've opened my heart and my eyes to that. And so if you've wanted that to be your impact, you've already done it with me. Yeah. So I've already got my hand. You've already done it. So congratulations.
Thank you so much.
You've done exactly what you just wished you want to, and you've done it for me personally. So thank you for doing this, because I can tell you're an amazing coach, because you coached me in this. As I'm here to talk with you about your book, you flipped it now and you've coached me through our conversation. So if you're listening and you're like, is Sian a coach that I should work with? I'm going to tell you, she just worked with me and it works. So there you go. I didn't anticipate that when we sat down to talk today, and you've already proven that to me. So
no, thank you so much.
If that's your goal, you've already reached it with one person. So congratulations.
It means a lot you saying that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Everyone go and check out all the information in the show notes for Sian, and connect with Sian, because I think you're going to learn so much by just being in her world. And pick up the book. Make sure you leave a great review for the book as well, wherever you purchase that. Let other people know how amazing the book is, and go to the website and connect, because I think you're gonna find somebody that's in your corner that really wants to help you take control of that submarine and get it to work well with their rowboat. So, Sian, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for checking out the latest episode of Living the Next Chapter. I'm so happy to bring on these amazing authors and to share their stories, but I do have to confess I have a problem. And people who know me best would say, Dave, you have more than one problem. My problem is I have more episodes than I can release to you through my audio host, but I have a solution for you. Oh yes, head over to our YouTube channel. Subscribe today to our YouTube channel, and you can get the most recent episode. I'm posting this episode today that I recorded today, and you can get it now on YouTube. Jump the line, move right past that big burly guy at the door. You can get right in and get the most recent episode of Living the Next Chapter on our YouTube channel. Make sure you go there. livingthenextchapter.com has all the information. And again, I want to thank you for making this podcast such a great joy to create. Catch you on the next one.